So, as I'm sure you probably know by now, D&D is coming out with a new edition. Well, kind of. It's more of a remaster that fixes some things and breaks other things, but that's besides the point. Because what I want to talk about in this video, and the question I want to pose to you guys, is if D&D has crossed a line or the point of no return. And first, let me explain what I mean by that. So, fairly recently, a little-known game by the name of Baldur's Gate 3 was released, and it was incredibly popular, to say the least, and was a massive success. In fact, it was so popular that WotC kind of made Baldur's Gate 3 the D&D cover girl, despite WotC not being super involved in its development. But because of how successful Baldur's Gate was, a lot of creators and players were exposed to D&D who may have not been very interested in it before. And I don't know about you guys, but when Baldur's Gate was at its all-time peak, I saw tons of streamers, YouTubers, and friends of mine admit that they would love to play more video games like Baldur's Gate 3, or they would love to try out D&D if it's anywhere as near as fun as Baldur's Gate. And I think WotC saw lots of similar sentiment online and really took it to heart. And recently, a lot of announcements have come from WotC and D&D that have signaled to the entire community that they will no longer be prioritizing physical play and will be transitioning all material to the new 2024 D&D rules, especially once their VTT is up and running. And actually, recently, they tried to force all character sheets, both old and new ones, on D&D Beyond to use the new 2024 rules, but unsurprisingly, they got a lot of backlash for that and have since reverted that change. But after all of these ominous signs, from cutting back on physical book production to pushing digital bundles with VTT exclusives to heavily pushing their 3D virtual tabletop to partnering with VTT producers to D&D becoming 5e forever, all of this has shown the community that D&D is trying to leave the physical gaming world behind and become a game system that is primarily played digitally, which is the line that many people believe D&D has crossed. I mean, after all, D&D has always been a game system that is designed to be played physically with physical dice and physical minis with your friends physically around a table, and playing online was kind of just a niche thing up until recently. So by basically showing the entire community that the brand plans to leave physical play in the past and transition to being almost entirely online, they have essentially alienated the entire core of their community that still plays physically, because after all, the vast majority of people who play D&D play physically, right? Well, maybe, and we'll talk about that in a second though. But in my opinion, I don't think D&D, and by extension WotC, will ever truly stop making material for physical play like minis and books and things like that, because minis and books sell, and especially the books that are limited edition have nice little shiny covers. But I honestly think that D&D just finally read the writing on the wall, so to speak, and realized that most markets nowadays are going more and more online and more digital, and TTRPGs are no exception. So they probably realized at some point that the future of all TTRPGs is sadly digital. And if you want to know why I think that and why most likely WotC thinks that, then stick around to find out. Like for instance, look at how many virtual tabletops are being released every year and how many virtual tabletops are currently out there. Or like how every TTRPG Kickstarter has a digital only tier or a VTT tier, or how much money VTTs with a digital marketplace make every year just by selling token bundles, PDFs, dice or token cosmetics, and subscriptions. Because in all honesty, both from a financial and a business standpoint, if you're creating a TTRPG or have a TTRPG in today's world, it just makes sense and is smart for you to try to partner with a VTT going forward like Foundry or Roll20, which are both very compatible with new game systems, because it allows you to get access to new players who may want to try your game system, because in all reality, a lot of new players nowadays play only online. And after hearing that, you may be thinking,
oh, that's just ridiculous. How could anyone possibly want to play online when everyone knows that playing in person is vastly superior?
Well, actually, a lot of people. With my own personal experience as a professional game master, I want to say a good like 98% of my games that I've ever ran have been online, and even when I'm running in person, I generally like to use a VTT to help me run my game sessions. And out of all of those games that I've ran online, a large portion of them have been directed towards beginners who are trying out a new game system, or have been towards people who are trying to transition their group to being entirely online and want to learn how to use a VTT. And even if you don't believe what I said earlier when I talked about how lots of newer players nowadays are preferring to play online using a VTT, or how a lot of in-person groups are transitioning to being online, or perhaps a mixture of the two, then hey, don't take my word for it. Take Sly Flourish's word for it, because they held a series of polls over the course of 5 years that asked a series of pressing TTRPG questions, including a question that asked, do you play D&D in person or online? And would you look at that? I'm completely in the wrong. The numbers show 70% still play in person. And wait, this is from 2019. Okay, so let's see if there's an updated poll. Okay, so here's one from 2022 that shows the complete opposite actually of the previous poll. But wait, that's from 2022, so that doesn't count because it was during COVID. But wait, then there's the most recent poll from last year, 2023, that shows the numbers have kind of evened out. But it still shows a massive increase in the amount of players that play online as opposed to in person. Interesting. And if you also want to read through this article and perhaps see some of the other really interesting polls that Sly Flourish held, then don't worry, I got you. The link's in the description. But while you're digging around in the description looking for that link, go ahead and leave a comment as well talking about how you feel regarding this trend of TTRPGs, especially D&D, going more and more online. Because I'm really curious to see how you guys feel about this. But anyways, going back to the Sly Flourish poll, I feel like D&D and by extension WotC have seen very similar numbers and have seen the trend that more and more people nowadays just tend to play online using a VTT. And I don't think these numbers necessarily show that people prefer to play online, but I do think it shows that if people want to play their favorite TTRPG with their friends, the easiest way to do that is by using a virtual tabletop and playing online. Because as we all know, sometimes scheduling a session is the most difficult part of playing any game system. And D&D has definitely recognized that, which is why they're trying to transition to being primarily online and why they're really trying to push their VTTs. But are they even going about this the correct way? Well, let's actually take a look at what D&D has done in the past and what they're doing recently to try to lay the foundation for their online empire. So to start off, let's talk about probably the biggest thing that D&D has done recently, which is their new edition or version or remaster or whatever you want to call it, D&D 5e 2024 edition. In my opinion, the biggest issue I have with the new version of D&D 5e is that it is extremely confusing for new players to look up content regarding it. I mean, just imagine being a brand new player and trying to look up rules for Barbarian Class 5e and finding tons of websites and wikis that show one set of rules and then other websites that show slightly different rules. Or if you buy the books and get confused when reading a rule and look up a video explaining it, it may be a video explaining the 2014 version rather than the 2024 version, which can just lead to more confusion. Like, the search engine optimization for this new version of D&D has kind of screwed everything up in my opinion, and sure, you can easily fix that by typing in 2024 at the end of any D&D rule-related search or whatever, but new players probably don't know to do that. And on top of this, by making D&D stick with 5th edition forever, and I guess we'll have to see if they actually do that, they have, in a sense, made it a rule set for a video game that can be easily tweaked and updated if necessary, which is really easy to do if the majority of people who use your rules use your on-site PDF or rule set for VTT. So in a way, theoretically of course, changing the rules to the game would just be kind of like patching a video game. You just have to make some small tweaks, include in the patch notes that you changed how the Paladin's Smite works, again, and then move on. But speaking of virtual tabletops, D&D is obviously making their own, which we'll get into here in a little bit, but recently D&D has officially partnered with other competitor virtual tabletops such as Roll20 and Foundry, and by partnering with them, these VTTs have given their D&D systems huge overhauls. And as someone who's used both of these virtual tabletops extensively and have kind of seen the before and after of the D&D overhaul, let me tell you, the new D&D system is pretty good, or at least the look and feel, I guess. But ignoring all of the new features, bells, and whistles that these overhauls come with, one thing that you may notice is the new theme that is consistent across both platforms, which is very D&D Beyond-esque, which I guess is just the new look of D&D. But what myself and many other people were very confused about is why would D&D partner with these virtual tabletops who are by all means competitors to D&D, especially since D&D is trying to push their own virtual tabletops? It seems kind of counterintuitive. Well, in my humble opinion, I think that the reason why they did this was to try to heal some of the wounds that they caused from the OGL fiasco, and as a sign of good faith to some of these virtual tabletops who have been consistently pushing D&D content for years without being officially partnered with D&D. Plus, this is just a good business move for D&D. And as far as 2D virtual tabletops go, D&D has one, but yeah, it's just not good. I mean, it is an alpha to be fair, so it's a little unfair to compare it to Roll20 and Foundry, but even still, it's not in a good spot right now. But one thing that a lot of people have gotten upset about with Roll20 specifically is that any content you buy on D&D Beyond doesn't transfer to Roll20 and vice versa. So if you want to buy the new D&D adventure or have access to the new character creation features, you either have to choose to buy it on Roll20 or D&D Beyond. And for some of you, this may be a no-brainer, because Roll20 obviously has the better VTT, and you can get to actually use the maps and material in the books that you buy on Roll20 as opposed to with D&D Beyond. If you buy a book, you currently only really get to read the book digitally, and you get to use the character creation options. So of course you would go with Roll20 if it came down to choosing which platform you'd buy the book on, but that may not always be the case. Because most likely what D&D plans to do with their new digitally focused business model is they want you to always buy all of your D&D related content on D&D Beyond, which makes sense because you'll most likely get the most bang for your buck and have access to exclusive deals, or so I suspect. But this kind of speculation isn't too far-fetched because look at their new books, for example. And all of their promotional material for their new books, they advertise that if you pre-purchase now, you can get a super cool golden dragon miniature that you can use in their new 3D virtual tabletop called Sigil, which is cool, I guess, but it's a digital asset that you get for buying physical books. And I don't know about you guys, but what this seems very similar to is what the video game industry does whenever a new video game is being released and they advertise that if you pre-purchase it now or buy the digital deluxe edition, you can get a cool in-game character skin or an elite mount skin or something to that effect. Like, you know what I mean? And of course, this is all speculation, but what many people think is going to happen is that this will become the new norm and D&D will advertise these little digital incentives with every new release to try and incentivize people to buy their content on D&D Beyond, because you not only get the book and unlock the character creation options and their easy to use character builder, but you also get a cool armor set that you can customize your miniature with using their new mini maker that also ties into the 3D virtual tabletop. And don't get me wrong, it's all fine and dandy that D&D is trying to be more online, because after all, everyone's doing that nowadays. But what myself and many other people are beginning to realize is that they're really trying to build this channel or funnel into incentivizing everyone on the platform to use their 3D virtual tabletop. Because if they continue to do what they did with the most recent book release, where they kind of incentivize you to buy the bundles because you get the cool little golden dragon miniature or whatever, then in the future it may be similar with other book releases. Or it may be a thing where, depending upon your subscription tier, you get more digital assets for the 3D virtual tabletop every month, or for the 2D virtual tabletop, or so forth. Like, you kind of see the trend, you know what I mean? And speaking of digital assets, I'm curious to see how they handle new book releases that have battle maps included in them, because we already know that if you buy a book with a battle map, you'll get that map for free on Maps, their 2D virtual tabletop. I wonder if they'll charge extra for the 3D version of those maps, or if you'll get them for free, or if they just won't include them at all, or perhaps there will be a Map Maker Deluxe subscription tier or something. But anyways, all of these changes that they're planning to do for D&D Beyond and trying to integrate D&D Beyond into their VTTs and vice versa, and incentivizing you to buy things, if you already buy all your stuff on D&D Beyond and you already play primarily online with your gaming group, then all of these changes are amazing. I mean, like, think about it. D&D is making their own official virtual tabletop, complete with dynamic lighting, animations, cool looking miniatures that you can customize, plus it ties directly into D&D Beyond and its character creator, and you get bonuses for supporting D&D. So, like, what's the problem here? Well, going back to the beginning of the video and the line that D&D kind of crossed, they're planning on leaving the physical play world behind, and not like immediately or whatever, because they're obviously going to be still producing physical miniatures and books and things like that. But it doesn't take someone like a super genius to see that they're trying to really incentivize people into using their 3D virtual tabletop, and are probably going to be heavily monetizing it in the future. Because if you're using the virtual tabletop, then they can sell you cosmetics, keep you on a subscription plan, or feed you ads if you're using the free version, assuming there is a free version, and incentivize you to buy the new digital books, because the new D&D Forgotten West adventure comes with an exclusive Beholder mini that's wearing a cowboy hat. And you don't want to miss out on getting Bob the Gunslinging Beholder, do you? Now, obviously this isn't an issue for everyone, because after all, D&D is a business and they have to make a profit, and obviously if they're making a really cool product, then why shouldn't you want to buy it? You know what I mean? And to be honest, if D&D truly does succeed at making an amazing product of a virtual tabletop, and it puts all of their VTTs to shame, and they follow through on their promise of putting more third-party content on D&D Beyond, then who knows, maybe I'll go back to D&D Beyond and switch back to D&D 5e, and who knows, maybe their VTT will become my new favorite virtual tabletop that I use for my game sessions. But that all remains to be seen, because as of now, their 3D virtual tabletop has yet to be released, and the beta is coming out later this year. The 2D virtual tabletop is still in alpha and has a long way to go before it can stand up to a VTT like Roll20 or Foundry. And on top of that, the 3D virtual tabletop we don't really know very much about in terms of its pricing. Like, will it be an additional subscription? Will there be microtransactions and additional costs? Will it be free? Like, there's so much we still don't really know. But I'm sure we're going to be hearing a lot more about it in the coming months and years, and you guys already know I'm going to be keeping you updated on that stuff because I love my VTTs. But with that, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, consider leaving a like and a comment down below regarding something I talked about in this video, and also consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this. But anyways, everybody, I hope to see you in the next video. Take it easy. Bye-bye.